Howdy, howdy, howdy. This is your Commissioner Kevin Molnar here to bring you the Week 12 recap of the GLOAT League. I figured I'd do it this way, then write it up just to see if this catches on, or, I don't know, spice it up a little bit and see where it goes. Wondering if this will be easier than writing the insanely stupid and long rambling on recaps that you're accustomed to. So, without further ado, let's get to it. Week 12 recap, a lot of stuff is happening in the league. Trade deadline is approaching. Actually, it's tomorrow. Chances are no more moves will be made, but get it in before noon if you want to. A lot happened. A lot of teams still fighting for the playoff spots. A few more teams have clinched their playoff spots. Who won, who lost, you already know. So, come with me on this journey to recapping this whole week's events. Hope you all had a good Thanksgiving. I know I did, especially with Amari Cooper going off for a lovely 38 points. So that kind of made the day. I actually, funny story, thought about benching him prior to the game, but luckily we were eating dinner at the time, and yeah. So, suck it, Theus. Alright, let's start this off with the game of the week last week, which featured a potential championship game preview featuring Mike's younger brother versus Knockout CP Freshmart. That is Dave versus his brother Mike, co-owned by Tim, or Tim co-owned by Mike, whichever one you want to give alpha dominance to. Preferably, I think it's Tim. Tim's the alpha male, even though Mike makes all the trade and apparently vetoing decisions for the team. Tim and Mike ended up winning this game 156-151 on a stellar Monday night performance from Demaryius Thomas and Dion Lewis. But the MVPs, obviously, of the game were Christian McCaffrey for Tim and Mike with his 46.7 points against Dave with Saquon Barkley, who tallied 33.2 points. I don't know about you, but I personally am sick and tired of Saquon Barkley every week putting up monster numbers. Not to take away from the talent, it feels like every week Eli Manning just dumps it down to him or throws it to Beckham. Being a Beckham owner, I don't really mind that, but it just pisses me off seeing Saquon Barkley getting 14 to 20 check down passes every week. A lot was on the line with this game. The division title was technically at stake if Dave would have won 2 games, but Mike and Tim and Mike prevented that from happening, going 2-0, while Dave fell to 1-1. Dave's magic number for winning the division is just 1 now, so he either has to win his matchup against, I believe he's playing Mark and Scott next week. I want to say yes. Yeah, he plays Mark and Scott next week. So Dave, both teams have clinched a playoff spot and are basically playing for the division crown. Keep in mind, if you win the division, you get $50. So there is a point to that. All right, moving on. SNM BDSM versus Jimmy Football. Man, it's funny. It's amazing how just one simple mistake can cost you. No offense to Jim, but this game wasn't really more about him winning. It was about Mark and Scott blowing it. Yeah, Austin Eckler on the bench, 26.3 points against an Arizona awful run defense, which, he hasn't done much going into it, but Arizona's defense gives up loads of points on the ground, plus Melvin Gordon was a game-time decision. He ended up playing, and he ended up getting hurt. More to that later. But Eckler coming away with 26.3 points. Meanwhile, Scott and Mark started Giovanni Bernard and Willie Snead, who combined for 3.2 points, all of it actually coming from Bernard. Snead put up a goose egg. Looks like Lamar Jackson's not throwing his way at all. So I talked to Scott. More than likely, they said they were going to bench Bernard for it, but that's still, they ended up losing by 12.7. That's the difference maker right there. Mark and Scott could have been looking at a win at least, as opposed to going 0-2 for the week. Jim, meanwhile, gets goes to 1-1 for the week, winning by the head-to-head matchup, but falls short of the total points. Jim was led by T.Y. Hilton, who scored 19.5 points. Mark and Scott were led by Leonard Fournette, who scored 25.8 points. Jim is not technically in the playoffs yet, but he's just about. His total points are ridiculous. His record at 13-11 kind of keeps him safe, but one win for him next week guarantees him a spot. Moving on from Mark and Scott, they're in deep. Leonard Fournette has been announced to be suspended for Week's 13 game. I don't know who they play, but Carlos Hyde and T.J. Yeldon are now huge players for Jacksonville, especially since they decided to bench Blake Bortles as well. More to that later. Going to Jim real quick, a lot of controversy was made a few weeks ago when he traded for fantasy god Todd Gurley, as well as T.Y. Hilton and Jordan Howard. A funny stat about this, I looked that up. Since he made that trade with Lombardi, Jim has gone 2-4. So the trade has kind of hurt him. I mean, having to start the lower tier quarterbacks, Ryan Tannehill, the 49ers quarterback whose name escapes me right now. I want to say it's C.J. Beathard. No, it's Nick Mullins. Nick Mullins and Josh Rosen. I mean, out of the three, I think Tannehill has the best potential fantasy-wise, but still not saying much, man. Jordan Howard's been a massive bust this year, much to my chagrin, and Hilton's been coming around. So, like I said, he scored 19.5 points this week, so not bad. But yeah, Jim 2-4 since making that deal with Lombardi, so maybe that thing wasn't all that's cracked up to be. Moving on to the Rainbow Dash division, where Ed had that wrapped up, I think, about a week or two ago. He played Sean this week in their amazing, epic Sugar House Lane rivalry. Ed winning this time around, winning 109.3 to 91.6. This is Sean's third straight game losing against Ed, and since the creation of this rivalry, Sean won the first, and now dropping 3 straight. Anyways, Sean's team, man. I mean, he's been up and down all year, but it seems to be. I mean, right now it seems to be being held together by Scotch tape and toothpicks. He's lost 4 in a row, 2 straight weeks of not putting up much. Ed, meanwhile, has gone 6-2 since losing to me. Sean this week, he was led by Cam Newton, who obviously is probably his best player. 22.5 points from him. Brilliant move, actually, too, on his part. I got to give him a lot of credit for this, Sean. Picking up Antonio Callaway and dropping Devin Funchess, who was a late scratch. Callaway, 16.2 points. Fantastic move, Sean. Good job. It's a shame Jordy Nelson and Danny Amendola didn't get the memo. Jordy, how do you score negative 0.2 points? I mean, first off, what is Oakland doing running a reverse or any kind of run with Jordy Nelson? That's just it's a very Raider thing to do, it feels like. It's just really odd. Ed, meanwhile, was led by Jameis Winston's 22.9 points. Drew Brees and Sony Michel also combined for each had over 20 points as well. Kamara kind of crapped the bed for 10 points, but Ed didn't need it. So Ed is looking to be, Ed goes 1-1 for this week. Sean goes 0-2. Sean still again in the playoff chase, but his chances are quite dwindling. Ed, meanwhile, is battling for the number 1 overall seed, and once again is the Rainbow Dash division champion. Congrats to him. You suck. Meanwhile, in the other divisional matchup, we had Andy and Bree's IR squad taking on Todd Dick Slap City. Andy and Bree won this one handedly, 131 to 102. Massive props for both these teams, coming from Josh and Frank for keeping it at even scoring, because apparently decimal points are for idiots. Todd this week, man, it's just been a reoccurring trend with him. He hasn't scored a single victory since week 9. He has just kind of, after starting off so poorly, coming back and actually making a legit run at this playoffs, his team has just kind of fallen off the map. I know he's dealt with a lot of injuries, specifically Cooper Kupp. That killed him. And having to rely on the Raiders' offense, again, like I said, with Jordy Nelson, they're doing runs with him. Derek Carr hasn't been good all year. I personally think it's Gruden's fault. Doug Martin led his team this week in points, but what does that tell you about the rest of his team? If Doug Martin's your highest scorer, you're fucked. I'm sorry for using profanity. I thought I wouldn't, but I'll get to Andy and Bree's playoff chances in a bit, but to be honest, to keep it short, they're controlling their own destiny. Todd, meanwhile, I mean, he's in trouble. He's now at 10-12 or 10-14, and he needs to right this ship very fast. Moving on to the Pinkie Pie division. About time this division finally showed up. The division this week held the 2 highest scoring teams of the week, and the 2 losers of the games in the head-to-head matchups produced the 6th and 8th highest scorers of the week. So massive props to all of us. I mean, me, Julia, Josh, Frank, Lombardi, and Theus. Sucks for Theus and Lombardi this week because, I mean, they both came away with losses, but at least their teams are finally producing. Could keep them out of the Portos. Oh, hi, Marks. Kevin and Julia taking on Theus this week. Kevin and Julia coming out with the 165.3 to 128.7 win. This clinched the division for them, so first division win ever, or I'm sorry, first division title ever for Kevin and Julia. And the second, sad as it is, only the second playoff appearance for the commissioner, which is, once again, quite embarrassing. It's my own league and can't even win. They win the division, but it came at a big cost this week. Melvin Gordon sprained an MCL on a stupid, why was he even playing this game? Why was he even in? It's against the Cardinals. San Diego, you didn't need to play Gordon. I'm sorry, I'm just venting right now, but it was just, I was hoping he was hurt going in. They had no reason to play him, and now he's out for several weeks and fucking over playoff chances. No, I mean, not intentionally, but what are you gonna do? Meanwhile, Theus was led by shocker of all things, another Browns player, Nick Chubb, scoring 27.8 points. Theus, a few weeks ago, was a contender to make the playoffs, but now going 0-4 in the last 2 weeks, he is mathematically eliminated. I will go into my mathematics. I am actually 100% certain he is mathematically eliminated from the playoffs this time. But going 1-1 for the week, while Kevin and Julia go 2-0. Once again, Kevin and Julia win the division and clinch their playoff spot. They are now playing for seeding next week, while Theus gets ready for the Portos. And the other division game in the Pinkie Pie division, Josh and Frank in this rivalry game end up beating Lombardi 169.7 to 133.5 in one of the higher scoring games of the year. Both these teams showed up. Man, it's crazy. I just, when Lamar Miller is trying to get you a win and Juju Smith-Schuster is doing nothing but gain 75 to 100-yard touchdown catches, it's absolutely amazing. Juju led Josh and Frank 37.9 fantasy points. After being stated that they were mathematically eliminated from the playoffs by a dumb commish, Josh and Frank have now gone 5-1 in their last 6 games, and now have a legit outside shot at making the playoffs. And they're 10-14 right now. They win out. I mean, they win 2 games this coming week. I mean, anything can happen. They're only 1 game out of the playoffs, and their point total is pretty darn high. So they will go to that. Like I said before, Lombardi was led by Lamar Miller, 23.7 points. Me and Lombardi share a common disdain for this player. I don't know what it is about him. It just feels like he should be a lot better than what he is. Lombardi, it's funny, he started the year at 5-1, which is just absolutely incredible. And he's just fallen off the map. I'm trying to find his standings right now. So he started at 5-1, and now he's 8-16. So just, I don't know what happened. I think it was, I talked to him a little bit. He kept trying to move Todd Gurley, but no one was biting. Just a brutal year for Lombardi. Hopefully he can rebound and stay out of the Portos, or he might make history on the wrong side of it, being the first ever champion to win the Porto. Moving on, finally, to the Applejack division, where things are starting to heat up a little bit. In the one game, we had Kyle versus Jim Schwartz. Did Josh Gordon get suspended yet versus Kevin has smelly feet? Children. Flipping children. Kyle ends up winning this one by a landslide, 158 to 74.9. Again, Josh and Frank extend their gratitude to Kyle for keeping it at even and decimal points. Kyle, it's been a roller coaster season for him. The last 3 weeks he's gone 4-2, but those 4 wins came in 2 weeks. Like, he's either going to go 2-0 or 0-2 every week. He's also the only team in the league, funny as it sounds, to be undefeated when he has no quarterback starting. Jimmy Football can attest to this, and as can Andy, and how painful that was to watch. His record now is at 11-13, tied with Andy for the 8 spot. And even though he's some points behind Andy, controls his own destiny, it seems like. So, anyways, in this matchup against Jim Schwartz, Jim's top scorer was Rob Gronkowski, who finally came back after multiple weeks of missing, scoring 14.6 points. I don't know what you do if you were Jim Schwartz this year. Granted, he wasn't at the draft this year, but I really don't think any of us did anything malicious or any kind of... we gave him Rob Gronkowski. Not we didn't give him, but he drafted technically Rob Gronkowski, Mark Ingram, flipping Alshon Jeffrey, Isaiah Crowell, who's been solid. I mean, all of them, LaShawn McCoy, all big names in fantasy football. It's just everybody is underperformed. I mean, Gronkowski's injuries, Rodgers getting hurt in week 1 and not living up to the expectations of his draft stock. I mean, right now, he's the 8th best fantasy quarterback in football. That's crazy. Aaron Rodgers isn't even in the top 5. Include, I mean, LaShawn McCoy and Alshon Jeffrey's decline. I mean, Jeffrey, they both show up on sporadic moments, but it's just, how do you trust starting either one of them? Especially now, Jeffrey's been terrible. Just chalk it up to a bad season for Jim. Anyways, Jim goes 0-2 this week, and Kyle goes 2-0. So, once again, Jim prepping for the Portos. Kyle hoping to get into the playoffs. Find out next week. Finally, we got Magic Gary versus Gentile. Magic Mahomes versus Moskowitz Lenise. Gary ends up losing this game 127.8 to 106.8, now holding a 1-game lead for the division crown. It's crazy as it sounds. Gary started off this year as, I mean, he was going to be, he looked like one of the top teams to beat with the Chiefs offense. Still could be, but over the last 6 weeks, he's gone 4-8. I mean, his team seems to be on the decline. Granted, this week is it's an exception to the rule since the Chiefs were on a bye, so Gary was just sticking together anything that could work this week. Gentile, meanwhile, I mean, he's a playoff contender at this point. I mean, he's pretty much in. His team would have to collapse horribly next week. He would have to go 0-2 and be outscored by several teams not to make it. But it's like Gary just doesn't want to win the division, and Gentile's like, well, if you don't want it, I'll take it. Don't matter. He's 1 game behind. This is just like, it's up for grabs for both of these teams. For Gary, this week was really bad. He just happened to have a bad week. Obviously, the Chiefs being on bye, that hurts his team. Before the game, he dropped Eric Ebron, which is an understandable move. I mean, with him and Jack Doyle, I mean, it seemed to be a lottery pick who would get what. But unfortunately for him, Jack Doyle, as of now, Jack Doyle and Andy Dalton, his other quarterback who he traded for, just like how he traded for multiple other quarterbacks in this league, went on IR, and he wasted a lot of his waiver money to pick up Colt McCoy, who, I mean, is a good fill-in starter, but I'd rather feel more comfortable with Andy Dalton, so kind of hurts. So yeah, Eric Ebron now on waivers and will probably be the highest picked up player this week. It'll be interesting to see who gets him. Feel for Gary, but you still have Mahomes, Tyreek Hill, and Kelsey moving forward, and you've already made the playoffs. So props to you. Kind of funny too, and ironic that since Gary spent so much on Colt McCoy, Gentile picks up Josh Allen this week, and he goes off for 26.3 points. It was also picked up on waivers for Gentile. Huge move. Gary was led by Adam Humphries. See what I said about Doug Martin earlier. He's boned if that's his high score. But on the plus side for Gary, he could take solace that Gentile didn't get 2 wins this week. He went 1-1, and Gary went 0-2, which still, once again, Gary has a 1-game lead going into the championship, or going into the final week. But Gary plays Kyle, who is playing for a playoff spot, and Gentile gets Jim, who hopefully who could play spoiler to him. Moving on to the Bubble Watch. I mean, I'll be brutally honest with you. I think everything listed on the web page for the site on the message boards kind of has anything you need. I mean, I'll be happy to answer any questions. The tiebreaker, once again, is points 4, which can be found on either standings page, but from the ESPN that just tells you the win-loss, or the message board, which tells you the point total as well. So, quick breakdown of it. 5 teams have clinched a playoff spot. Mike's younger brother currently sits at the 1 seed at 19-5. Superior Erection sits at the 2nd seed at 18-6. 3rd seed is Knockout CP Freshmart at 17-7. Ohio Marks leads at the 4 seed at 14-10. Magic Mahomes is also 14-10. They're the 5 seed. Gary and Kevin are separated by see if I can do the math real quick. 1571.5 to 1548. About 23 points, 24 points between the two. At sixth right now is Jimmy Football at 13-11. Moskowitz Lenise sits in the 7 seed at 13-11. They can switch up at any point. And right now, the 8 seed is the IR squad at 11-13 due to points. 9 is Kyle at Kevin Smelly Feet at 11-13, so he's down by just a few points. And then there is a 4-way tie at 10-14 with with S&M BDSM. Why is this league 16 teams? Bo Jackson and Dick Slap City. So any one of them, if any of those 10 and 14 teams find a way to go 2-0, and Kyle and Andy go 0-2, or one of them goes 1-1, or they both go 1-1, there's basically, the best way I can put this is 6 teams have pretty much clinched. Jimmy Football is pretty much in, considering his point total. He's at 1570. He's one of the top 6 scoring teams in the league, as I see. So 6 teams are in. Gentile, all he needs is 1 win to get in, guaranteed at Moskowitz Lenise, 1 win. But 1452. So basically, if Moskowitz Lenise goes 0-2 this week, that opens the door for another spot for other people to sneak in, specifically Andy and Kyle. But between those teams that are 10 and 14, they are all battling for just 1 spot, if they're lucky. So best of luck to all of you guys with that. Moving on to the Week 13 preview. Let's start with the game of the week. When looking at the Week 13 matchups, I've noticed one thing. There's 7 out of the 8 games have playoff implications on this. So how do you determine which game is most important? I think it's quite obvious which game is most important. The one that has nothing to do with the playoffs. Bobby Bushevich versus Josh and Frank still suck. There's nothing on the line in this game. Therefore, it's obviously the game to watch. So good luck to both of you guys in this epic confrontation of nothingness. My prediction with that, Lombardi's going to win just because Aaron Jones may light the world on fire this week against Arizona. He's got 2 guys on Denver versus Cincinnati's defense who just got torched by the Browns, so whatever. I think Lombardi will go 2-0 this week, and Diaz will go 0-2. Meanwhile, in the other game, in the Pinkie Pie division, Josh and Frank take on Kevin and Julia. Why is this league 16 teams take on Ohio Marks? Josh and Frank are playing for a playoff spot. Kevin and Julia are playing for seeding. My prediction in this, Josh and Frank get the win. I think their team has been incredible as of late. Dak Prescott's got a good matchup against the Saints. Russell Wilson's been on fire. I think Josh and Frank go 2-0, and Kevin and Julia will go 1-1 this week. Moving on to the Applejack division, Gary versus Kyle. Gary is playing for the division title in seeding. Kyle is playing to get into the playoffs. My prediction is Gary wins. I think he goes 2-0. Chiefs offense just dismantles the Raiders, runs it up, 49 points on them. Kyle, sadly, I think falters in this one, going 0-2. I think the Vikings are going to be in for a big letdown this weekend after beating the Packers. Final other Applejack action, Gentile taking on Jim Schwartz. Gentile is playing to get into the playoffs. Jim Schwartz is trying to play spoiler. My prediction, I got Jim winning this. I think he plays spoiler and goes 1-1, getting the heads-up victory, and Gentile falls short, going 0-2. Totally screwing with everything with this whole ordeal. All right, keep in mind, my predictions are terrible, and you kind of want me to predict against you, because if you see from the preseason predictions, I have like a 40% accuracy rating, I think, in my opinion. So, yeah, don't take my predictions with any hostility. It's all in good fun, anyways. Moving on to the Fluttershy, we got Mark and Scott BDSM. S&M BDSM taking on Mike's younger brother. Mark and Scott are playing for a playoff spot. Dave is playing for the division title and top seed. My prediction, Dave wins, but he goes 1-1 for the week. It's enough to win the division. As for Mark and Scott, no Fournette. Eli against the Bears. Little use for Gio. And Burkhead coming back, I think, hurts James White. Little hope. I think they go 0-2. So Dave will be the Fluttershy division champion and $50 richer. Another competition, KO CP Freshmart takes on Jimmy Football. Tim and Mike are playing for the division seeding, and Jim is playing to get into the playoffs. I think in this one, my prediction is Tim and Mike's matchups are way better, but there's going to be a lot of scoring. Tim and Mike will go 2-0, and Jim will go 1-1. And our final games of the week in the Rainbow Dash division, Sean will meet Todd. Both teams are playing for a playoff spot. Both teams need 2 wins to get into a shot. My prediction is the X factors for this one are Matt Ryan and Austin Hooper for Sean, along if he can get Watkins to play more than 5 snaps. And the Raiders offense for Todd, just because Kansas City's coming off a bye, I'm going to lean towards Sean in this one. I think he goes 2-0 after Cam putting up 14 points on Tampa Bay's defense. Todd completes the collapse at 0-2. Will that be enough to get Sean into the playoffs? Find out in a bit in my predictions. Finally, Ed versus Andy and Bree. Ed is playing for seeding, and Andy and Bree are playing for a playoff berth. And, a lot of this is going to ride on Thursday night's matchup. Dallas's defense has been playing great, but, New Orleans is on another level. Will that matter? I don't know. Basically, I think Thursday's game is going to determine, even though it's extremely early, it's going to determine how this one will go. If Andy can survive it, he's got a good chance to win. If he can't, which I really don't think he does, personally, I think with the quarterback problems that Andy's having with Blake Bortles getting benched, Lamar Jackson, the word out is, Flacco might not play this week. He's probably not going to, but moving forward, they're going to split time. I got to think about how I would rule in that if that were the case. I think I would just have both quarterbacks be allowed to be played as quarterbacks, of course. So, risk versus reward. I got Ed going 2-0 this week and Andy and Bree going 0-2. So, a lot of chances, a lot of changes going into this week for the playoffs, but ultimately my final prediction for the playoffs the following week in week 14 will be the number 1 seed. I'm just going to do it. I'm going to do it in order to raise suspense for who I think the 8 seed and how the 4 through 8 seeds are going to fall. The number 1 seed, 1, 2, and 3 aren't going to change much. Mike's younger brother is still going to be the number 1 seed overall. He will move on. Ed, Superior Erections, will be the number 2 seed. Knockout CP Freshmart will be the 3 seed. And then here's where I think some changes are going to take place. The 4 seed will be Gary, Magic Mahomes. And his first round opponent will be none other than Hi Mox. That was a terrible impression of Tommy Wiseau, and I apologize for that. So it will be Magic Mahomes versus Hi Marks in the 4-5 matchup. The 3-6 matchup will feature Tim and Mike as they take on Jimmy Football. And I think that will be probably the highest scoring matchup in the first round of the playoffs. That should be a war. Ed, Superior Erections, will take on arguably probably Moskowitz will take on Moskowitz Lanice. I don't know about that one. Gentile might have his work cut out for him, but, he's pulled up upsets before. And finally, Mike's younger brother will take on the 8 seed at 12-14, completing the comeback and pissing me off even more, proving me wrong. Josh and Frank will have a chance to defend their title at the 8 seed. Why is this league 16 teams? 12-14 against Dave. So that's my playoff predictions for next week. I hope you all enjoyed this recap. If you listened to it, thank you. I'm going to put a poll up wondering if you want me to go forward doing it this way or doing not. The camera's just about to die. So anyways, best of luck to everybody in the league this week, except for Josh and Frank. I hope I crush you. Take care. Spike your hair. Woo, woo, woo. You know it.